All right. I'd like to bring this meeting to order. Thank you. So, order means order. Order means stop talking people in the front row. So, we are, this is our last class.
Oh no.
I know that you will be as sad to say goodbye to PHP as I will be. I will have to console myself with Christmas cookies and other sorts of things all break long until I get to teach all of you. I don't know, not you, I'm teaching other people. I'm actually not teaching anything in the fourth semester next semester, so there's like zero possibility that you will be having to suffer through one of my courses again.
What about the fall?
Well, not anything in fourth semester. I'm teaching, I'm teaching like Java again, and then a couple of other courses that are unrelated to this program.
Sir,
Yes?
what about in the fall term?
I don't know. I will know in the summer that things are usually, the course assignments usually get made like 2 or 3 months before the semester starts. So, you know, I don't have any idea. I will also probably be teaching stuff in the, well, actually, I'm going on pat leave in the summer. I plan to anyway, so, paternity leave. Yes, because my wife is having a child. Yes, thank you. Yes, the due date is May, in like May 10th. So, thank you. Yes, we will have another little one running around. Well, not running for a bit. They don't start running, you know, we'll have another, oh man. When a cold goes through the house, it's gonna be like just, oh man. Just a palace of snot. That's, you know. Anyway, so, yeah. So we should talk a little bit, we should clean up whatever remains of our PHP course. I feel like I gave a pretty good, reasonable summary of the major topics that are going to be on the exam last class. But for the purposes of people who may not have been paying attention, the topics of interest that will be on the exam in one form or another. Cookies, yes. Sessions.
What about security topics?
Security topics for sure.
REST API, like concepts?
Security, REST in concept. Right, no code questions for the rest.
Database.
And database,
But
yes.
there's gonna be code questions from the database, right?
Correct.
Quick question for database, do we need to know, because usually you just give us the what do you call it?
The connection code?
Connection code, do you expect us to know that offhand, or?
You can assume that the same rules will be applicable with respect to, you will be given like the line from the PHP documentation giving you how the function is to be used, but you will be expected to know how those functions are to be used.
Okay.
Right.
Say for example, say for example, the question might be, given that the database has already been connected, just do the rest of the, what do you call it, the queries and getting.
Well, it kind of depends on the question.
Like you'll have the connection code ready for us, but it's just up to us to know how to apply it, I guess?
Well,
Why don't you walk through how to execute a connection and like send it on the database?
that's a good idea. Why don't we, in fact, bring up our old REST example that I'd like to continue for this class, see if we can't get Twitter working. Let's take a look, because there's lots of database operations in that particular example, which I think is quite a good example for demonstrating concepts anyway. Yeah. Folder. Might as well get XAMPP up and started.
Does he want to have one second? Let's say
No, he's saying that, from what I understand, he wants the whole folder. But if he wants the whole folder, why does he want to get some, he can just run the game on Unity?
Because it takes time to compile it.
It's not our problem, well, it's not our problem.
No, he's making it your problem. He doesn't want to have to compile your project. He wants you to give him the executable, so he's spared in compiling your project so he can get through the marketing task.
But he's not really asking for it, he's just showing us like how to do it.
Well, again,
Well, it is what it is.
you should talk to the professor from that class.
He could just slip over.
It's not a problem. It's easier than I want to talk to the dean.
he doesn't have an office, so how the hell am I supposed to talk to him?
You can't just rely on professional having fun.
I can email it.
I tried emailing him.
Does not answer.
He answers like very late.
No. I don't know what to tell you. Again, I am only responsible for my own classes.
He's
So-
not even-
I just,
It's a thing,
anything I say about course policies in somebody else's course is not going to be correct, you know? So, let's take a look. Open up HP Docs. Okay, it's all still here. Whoops. I guess they didn't wipe the computer, so there you go. All right, so let's take a look.
Well, 'cause it's a server system, right? Like it's contained on database somewhere else. So I assume they keep your profile kind of intact.
It's actually, the XAMPP HT docs folder is being stored on the local hard drive of this particular Podium computer. Because it's outside of the network drive, right? You go right to it through the C drive. So, all that means is like, that computer hasn't been wiped for like some weeks now. Which means that it has been continuously on for all of that time. So, there you go, nobody shuts off the computers. Yes. Let's see here. Y O Y. Select folder. I trust myself. Yes, thank you. So, here we go. So this is our not Twitter example. The basic question is, how much am I expected to know about the initialization of a database connection, given that this was, boilerplate code that was copied and pasted into all of our assignments, and we didn't actually, at any point, learn this stuff. Well, where are the rest of my markers? Markers, ho! There they are. So, in general, you should know the following things. So please write this down and study this. Number one, you should know that the way that you establish a connection to a database is by initializing a new PDO object. This is done in a reasonably similar manner to Java. You use the new keyword, the name of the object, or the name of the class, and then you provide a list of parameters. It is reasonable to expect that this list, what these actual parameters are, will be documented in your, like the PHP documentation for that will appear in your cheat sheet, right? But it never hurts to not need the cheat sheet. The first parameter is the host that you're connecting to. SQL:local host equals localhost. Then you provide the username that you are accessing the database with and the password that you are accessing the database with. The reason that this host is localhost, both through XAMPP and through CS Unix, is because the Apache server and the SQL server, which are both different servers, are residing on the same machine. Therefore, from the context of something sitting in the Apache server, the SQL server is a local host. It's local to CS Unix if you're on CS Unix. Same thing on XAMPP. If your SQL server is local in the same way that your Apache server is local. When you access this with a browser, you're accessing localhost. When your Apache server is trying to communicate with your SQL server, it does not need to go through the internet to do so. It's on the same machine. Therefore, it is localhost. Question?
Would you ever save the initialized PDO between like sessions?
Ooh,
Would you ever store that?
I wouldn't. So, I mean, I guess in theory you could, but,
Like, does the PDO contain a state?
oh, it contains many elements of state. Like the thing I'm thinking is like, if you were to attempt to do that, you would likely run against obscure like data policies in Apache or SQL. Like SQL probably has a pretty aggressive timeout on connections, and probably the amount of time it would be between executions of your PHP script would be too long. You would have to establish a new session anyways on the database, so it's probably, it's just easier to establish a new one each time. And it doesn't cost you any, like you don't really gain much. You know, like one of the other things, this is like, imagine if this wasn't a localhost, right? Imagine it was another remote server, right? One of the things that occurs in the establishment of the connection is the establishment of the like the encryption key for that series of packets, right? You don't want that getting stale, right? Makes sense. Okay, cool. So, any questions so far? Yes,
Could you make it bigger?
I certainly could make it bigger.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Is this big enough?
Yes.
Is this too big? Okay, yes.
Will we lose marks if we don't use the trying catch?
Well, yes. The question then becomes, what happens if creating the PDO object fails? Pretty much every single time we've tried to do something in PHP that could fail, for example, filtering an input, what we get is a false as a return result, right? This is a terrible way to do business. It's a very bad way to do business. It is susceptible to that problem with weak versus strong equality in PHP. It's just like, it's bad and it's wrong and it's stupid that PHP ever did it in the first place. Especially considering exceptions have certainly existed for as long as PHP has existed. There is a movement within PHP to try to correct some of these problems, one problem at a time. So, rather than returning false as a result, having a database handle that's equal to false, if your connection to the server fails for any reason, it raises an exception rather than simply returning a false value. Not only does it raise an exception, it creates an exception object. E. This exception object contains a specific customized error message sent by the server, which can be echoed or something like that. You don't have to worry about memorizing this like die, exit on a non-zero status number, it would be sufficient as well. It's just, the idea is failure to establish a database connection is worthy of killing the entire script, right? So either die or exit. It even says using die should be avoided in production code. So, you do have to know that you need to use a try catch here. Yes.
Would we need the get message method?
Well, that is kind of like more, I probably would be inclined to forgive that. Like, if you just, echoed an error occurred and killed the program, it's more informative if you put this in.
Because the
But-
get message, doesn't it just specifically tell you the error that occurred?
Yeah, it tells you what error the database returned, right? Or like what error this thing found, like the database couldn't be found, the credentials are bad, something like that, right? Like without this, it's a less informative message, but still technically correct, if that makes sense. Question?
So if we say exit and then -1, inside the catch, is that acceptable?
I think that's acceptable. I think you should probably output some kind of message here, just to, tell the client that things failed abnormally.
So an echo statement would be fine, we just do that and then we do exit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just echo database connection failed, kill the program, and that's all she wrote. So, does that answer your questions about the opener for a database? Cool. Any other questions? Yes?
What is the die method?
Oh, it's like exit, but it says something as it exits. So it both kills the program and has some dying words. So those are the dying words of this PHP method.
So it's a respectful death.
It's, in theory, it's a respectful death, and its last words should be, transmitted and conveyed and respected, but,
Is there a better way?
just use exit with a non-zero exit status. Yes.
HTTP code statuses, we don't need to know them, correct?
No, I don't believe you do. You should be aware that they exist for your job, and they're reasonably important in REST APIs, like in actual reality, but here, they're a fair ways down the document on REST APIs. I'm not completely sure that all of the other sections covered that entire document. I didn't cover that entire document, it's like 14 pages, to dump all on us all in the last week, and I thought a working example would be a lot more useful than me just reading a slide to you.
Do we have to go through that whole slide for the
Um,
final exam? Or
I-
only where we covered?
Just what we covered and the concepts that we talked about last time in class.
How far did we cover?
Well, we kind of jumped around a little bit, it wasn't exactly linear, but we did having different behaviors based on your request method. We talked about what htaccess is and does, right? And we talked about,
The response code that you said we don't need to know?
I don't think you need to know about the response codes for the exam. The other thing that you should be aware of is how to get, or like, not how, but that parameters can be encoded directly in the URL. the request URI, rather than just getting parameters via the request body or via request parameters.
Yeah, there's also one other thing, because I'm looking at the cloud computing REST guide slide on slide 6. I'm looking at the full student data REST API, and it shows all the different pseudo methods. And there's two gets there. One of them has like a colon and an ID at the end. The other one doesn't. Could you maybe explain it?
I certainly could. I think that's an excellent question. Page 6, you said, right?
Yeah.
Backspace. No?
You have to use the left arrow or right arrow if you want to go back.
But I can put my cursor in there.
Yeah. Like even to move the
It's because it's checking for the is a number always valid, so if you delete it, then it's not a valid input. I know, I run into that problem with React Native all the time. It's stuck.
Sometimes technology doesn't make things easier. So, so let's discuss this table, which appears inside of the REST API cloud computing stuff. So, a full student data REST API. Now, I had intended, once we got users up and working on our Twitter example, to put this into, but you'll notice here, we have two different get parameters, or two different get methods, two different what's like the singular term for API? Because API is plural, right?
singular.
Yeah, it's like this is the API. What is an element of the API? An API.
APIs.
Application programming interface, you can use it both.
You use S.
This row in the table. All right. So in one case, we are using a get method, a get request to retrieve a list of valid student IDs. In this case, we are using a get request to retrieve information for a single student. You'll notice in places here, we have the colon character followed by ID. This is meant to designate a parameter, right? This is what the URI should look like if you want to access these different operations. So if the API receives a URL not containing that second slash, or that third slash, pardon me, and not specifying an ID number, and the method is get, that produces this operation. However, if the URL contains this one parameter slash separated tacked onto the end, and it's a get request, then it's performing this different operation. So we are basically we're switching which operation we're performing, not only based on what the method type is, but also based on the form of the URL, right? For example, just to pull this out a little bit further in detail, if we have our MyCanvas URL at the top here, we have, courses / course ID / files / file ID. And then I believe it sends some query parameters after that. Yeah. Some query parameters, doesn't matter, right? So the URL form of our address at the top for this page will follow this style, but instead of having the ID number specified as an argument, we would specify a course ID and a file ID. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what the colon means, right? The colon just means this is an argument. In URLs, you're assuming that like everything between two slashes is one argument, right? Does that make sense? Cool. Like the thing with the PDO object where you are not using the question marks but using like the names of parameters instead, and then you give it an associative array, also follows this convention. So, good. Any further questions about that? Okay. Any further questions about any course content of any type, kind, or anything whatsoever?
Yeah, could you just show the explode method again?
Yeah, sure. Right here. So, the explode method takes a string, splits it into an array of strings, based, which have been split on a particular character. You may be familiar with this operation in other languages. In Python, it's called split. And it's actually a method of the string class. Here it's just, PHP has this lovely thing where like nothing is attached to a class, everything is just a function. So explode is just a function.
The string length that you're passing, is that just telling it where to start the separation?
No, that's part of the substring.
So
Yes.
the separating from the substring from the server, that's the request URI, all the way to the, I'm guessing to the last number.
So for the substring function, the first argument is the string that you are cutting up. If you provide only one parameter, it's like start here and take the rest. The home URI variable is just whatever the front of that URL will be, right? So like, for example, I can echo.
So the substring that has everything after your YOY.
Yes,
I wanted to say for
request URI.
Okay.
Let me show you this series of things.
Like that.
Substring, or substr, this thing, and then string length. Remember, for strings you have to use string length and not count. Home URI, and then JSON encode. Explode this along the correct slash, which is /. So let's run this and see what we get. Localhost 10//YOY. There we go. Get wisdom. What's the matter? Oh, I'm expecting JSON, but I'm echoing data. That's okay, it should show up in the network. I should put some breaks in there, right?
Sir, did it not reset?
Did not what? Did what not reset?
No.
So, I'm getting this error because I haven't like gone into PHP MyAdmin and set up the database yet. That's okay, we'll do that in a moment. So the first thing that I get, and that's kind of tiny, let me blow it up. Wow, you're not gonna blow it. How about fonts? I'll just copy it into Notepad then, jeez. Refusing to zoom. What do you think this is? Okay. So the first echoed value here is the response URI as sent by the client. So yoy/API/posts. yoy/API does not convey any parameters, cannot possibly. That is only the directory in which the htaccess file exists. So by accessing that, all we are saying is you have found the dispatch script. So there's no point to having it if you're trying to read the parameters in the URL. So the substring, so basically we calculate the length of this, call substring on this thing, removing this portion, leaving us only with posts. And if we had more slashes, this would have like more parameters, but as it exists currently, we don't. If we like to post, then it would, but we would need the database set up first. So basically, what Explode is doing is it's just taking this one piece of the string and putting it in an array. But yeah, basically, the idea is to split on those slashes so you get an array of the input parameters, then you can do things with them. Like, you know, you can tell which API you are accessing. You know, is the first thing here posts? How many parameters were provided? Are they integers? Are they strings? What do they validate as? Right? Question?
When you were going through this, this application, building it, there was an issue with the connection. And it was because of the slash. Are we gonna end up getting marked on that level of detail? So I think it was like the / at the start of that URI.
Oh,
Didn't need to be there. Or
not the sort of thing I'm looking for on test. Not at all. I'm looking for, do you get the general cut? Like, are you getting the gist of it?
Yeah.
You know, are you getting the gist of it? Are you making any obvious bad mistakes? You know, like, for example, JSON decoding file handle is incorrect, right? But like some fiddly little thing you forgot there was a slash in there. It's almost like, it's like between a syntax error and like a semantic error, I'd say. In general, I'm not going to be too hard on syntax errors, but I am marking you for what you're actually trying to say with the code. So, yeah. Does that make sense? Any other questions?
Sorry, can you go back to the code again?
I most certainly can go back to the code. There we go. So, let's talk sessions. Let's put sessions in our database. So, or into our API. So we have our login and register files, .php. I'm going to decrease the size. Is this still an okay size at that? Okay. So basically, the way that we want to do this, our register, dispatch, and login scripts will now all share a common session, right? You'll notice each one of them has session start up at the top. Now, I am interested. So what I've done with this example is I have broken down the distinction between having a session and being logged in. You can have a session without being logged in, right? Part of the information we are going to store in the session variable, or the session superglobal, is whether the user has been authenticated and who they have been authenticated as, right? So, in our login script, you can see we have a line here. Session user is equal to data at 0 ID from the data that we are pulling from the database on the from the credentials database. This is the up here we are grabbing the entry for a user from the database. Here we are verifying their password. If the password verifies, then we set a user parameter inside of the session. If the user parameter is set, then this is a logged in session. Otherwise, it is an unauthenticated session, right? A logged in user will have more privileges, right? So, good. Question?
Could you explain the fetch on the PDO fetch
Oh,
associated?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, let's start here, right? This is our SQL command, right? We're preparing the statement using the database connection. That returns a statement object, right? From here, everything pertaining to this query will happen in this object, right? We then execute this statement using a list of arguments. Oh, and you remember how I said that this form is used when you're using the parameters in the PDO object? Well, there's your colon again, right? So once we execute that, we get success or failure based on whether that statement was, well formed and other sorts of things. If this statement was successfully executed, then the statement object itself has the return results of the query stored inside of it, right? So we connect to the database sends back data. That data is initially stored in the statement object, not in the success return result. To get the data out of the statement object, we use either fetch or fetch all. Fetch fetches one row of results. Fetch all fetches all of the rows of results, right? It's the same as the difference between fgetS and fread in a file I/O context. So, you may be saying to yourself, okay, sure, but what about this thing? You should think about this the same way you think about, for example, filter validate int or filter sanitize special characters. It's an option, right? The option that's currently being set here is, I wish to fetch these things as an associative array. Now, JavaScript doesn't care about the difference between associative arrays and objects, but PHP does. So it matters whether you fetch this as an object or an associative array. Since we've been doing associative arrays in this class so far this semester, I've chosen here to use an associative array. Does that answer your question? Do you have a question?
That was the same one.
Okay, cool. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so why don't you just use the fetch, instead of fetch all, that you don't have to use the, data, to get the first data. This is only going to bring data.
Well, to me, it's it's 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other, like fetching all and then accessing the first one versus just using fetch and just using the data directly. It's like synonyms, so, it does the exact same thing. In this example, I'm only interested in the first entry. Yes?
You've already explained this, but can you go over the prepare again? Like, I'm not really understanding what's prepared the command.
What it's doing, okay, so what prepare is doing It's taking the input string, scanning it for argument slots, right? Then creating an execute method which requires that number of arguments to be provided.
Okay.
So prepare is mostly scanning this string. Execute is performing checks to make sure the inputs are not SQL injection attacks.
Oh, so that'll like determine if it's successful or not, right?
Well, let's just say that if it contains an SQL injection attack, I'm not actually sure whether execute will like just block it or will return some kind of failure status. I'm not sure how it will behave actually. But yeah, this, you can think of that, to put it as simply as possible, right? Prepare readies a command to be executed. Execute sends that command to the database and receives its result.
And like runs it basically, right?
Yeah, execute means run. Yeah. Any other questions?
If on the exam we have a question where it involves like entering the username and password, is it important to have the line 14 in this code password hashing?
If the question is about password security and password hashing, yes. That is best practice. So if the question says best practice, that's best practice. Yes?
So to execute, are you required to prepare? Like, is that necessary?
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, what are you executing? The prepare statement returns, the prepare returns the statement object. Without this line, you have no object on which to execute,
Oh, okay.
right? You cannot execute directly on the database handle.
Gotcha.
Cool. Any other questions? These have been really good questions so far.
What is the U in this case? Given
Oh, it's a passed parameter at the top. It's just a received post parameter for the username. All right. Cool. All right. So anyway, I guess I have to create the databases now. What a pain.
is this on like Canvas?
It's in the announcements feed, yes. And I will repost it when this class is over.
It's under Getting Close. That's the title.
Yeah. Getting close to correctness. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna have to regen my database. Oh, what a chore. Alright. So, on a new database called YOY. Put it in Latin Swedish. Very good. We want a database for, what do we call these? Y's? There we go. Or did we call it wisdom? I gotta look it up now.
And are you making,
Wisdom.
Are you making the database on XAMPP or local host?
Oh, this is, this is XAMPP, so it is localhost.
Sir,
What?
can the website's motto for YOY be words of wisdom?
Sure. Website motto, activate. But I'm putting it in an H5 header.
It's fine. You don't have to do it. It's just something that came to mind.
Good. Create table. Go. So we had a auto incrementing primary ID called ID. We had text. It's useful to consult your PHP code at this instance. Yes, text, likes, and author. I remember we had a varchar of 281 because we're one better than Twitter. There we go. Yes, we'll take it. Good. now, we will also need a table for credentials. Credentials also needs a ID number, incrementing. Yes, yes, yes. It will need username and password. Username being a varchar size 64. Whoa, that was a little bit too fast there. Change this one to varchar 255. There we go. Right, good. So there we have our database set up. Now, oh, yes, bad credentials indeed. So, registering does not log you in here. Let's register Mr. Krabs, 123, password is money. There we go. User was added successfully. And now we log in with Mr. Krabs, 123, password is M-O-N-E-Y. Submit. Credentials validated. We get back to the page, and we can see at the top, user 1 is logged in. Very good. So far, so good. So, let's talk a little bit of one-page app, shall we? If the user is logged in, they should see the interface that we've been defining so far, but not the login page, right? The login dialog. If the user is not logged in, they should see the login dialog, but not the rest, right? In theory, at least. So, rather than having these nice little echo statements, right? Notice the way I'm telling is user set, right? That's how I'm telling. We can use a little bit of one-page app. No, actually, this is PHP. So, actually, let's just put this, grab this. I see I was already attempting this. Our information for logging in and registering should appear if the user variable is not set in a session. There we go. And otherwise, all of our interface stuff should be presented only to logged in users, pardon me. So now, if I delete my session cookie, can I, like, possible to pull this up here, dock to right, there we go, that's better. Thank you. So, if I go in and delete my session cookie, just because I need to establish a new session, there we go. Now, if we are not logged in, we are presented with the login page, right? Mr. Krabs 123 password is money. Submit. Credentials validated. Now, obviously, the reason, like, it's reloading the page because I'm using a form for this, the same way I did in the previous example. If you didn't want to use a form for this, you know, you would do an AJAX request or some other way of doing it, but this is kind of like quick and dirty example. So if we then go back, we are not presented with the login screen anymore. We are presented with only our interface. Make sense? So, despite the fact that this appears to be two completely different web pages, they are in fact the same source code file. Right? This is what's meant by the term one-page app. Yes?
Can you show what is visible on the inspector?
Yes, absolutely. So I've got my thing, this text area, on click. So it's not that the items have been hidden, right? These modifications were made in PHP, which means the HTML tags were modified before they were ever sent to the client. The client never even sees the old login and register forms, right? They're simply not sent from the server. Cool. So, now, our dispatch script should also, I can see I did a little bit of this as well. Our dispatch script should prevent people from posting if they're not a logged in user. You can see if is set session user, right? If the user has been validated, then we proceed with all of the lovely database access. But if the user has not been validated, we send a 403. Does anybody know what 403 is?
Forbidden.
Forbidden. That's right. Yeah. You can also see that we are now inserting into our database the author of the, actually, did we get that far? Yes, we did. We're sending the user ID who created the post to the database, right? So, if we take a look, so let's post a few things. I like money. Money is my only friend. I hope money goes to my funeral. That got dark quickly. So, it's a joke, people. So there's our login credentials. If we go to our wisdom, you can see our author number has appeared, right? Now, just for the sake of making things a little bit more fleshed out, we don't have a log out button yet, but, you know, for now I'm just going to delete the session cookie.
Sir, that's called user retention.
What? Oh yeah, not having a logout button is for user retention? Yeah, that's good. So reload, and I'm back to the login page. I'm going to register a new user. Squidward. Password is clarinet. Submit. Good. Login. Squidward. Password is clarinet. Add credentials. That would happen to Squidward, wouldn't it? Clarinet. Oh man. The curse of Squidward continues. How did I spell it? That's the fun thing about having the database. You can just see if you misspelled the name. Oh no, you can't. It's a hash. Nah. All right. Squidward's done. It's fun bubbles. password is 12345678990. There we go. SpongeBob. Credentials validated. Now, if we have our second user indicate some, or post some things, I'm ready. Post, 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 because he says it a lot. If we go to our wisdom, there we go. You can see we now have author number 3. Cool, right? So let's do a couple of other things. It's still possible for anyone to delete anybody else's posts. Oh, do I still have something in there? Yeah, oh yeah, I still have that. Pardon me. All right. I'm going to comment that out. There we go. Get wisdom. There we go. It is still possible. Oh my goodness. I just had a drop of water drip on me.
It's not even raining.
It's not even raining. What am I being dripped on with? Is it asbestos?
Tears.
Holy water.
Tears.
It's actually a problem in buildings of this age.
Tears that are dripping on you.
It must be students' tears from the classroom above. Yeah, it's totally water. Oh my goodness.
As long as it's not a bathroom that's upstairs.
Oh, that's. Well, I mean, everybody has always wanted to sit on the professors, right?
Isn't that something almost like chemistry?
I'm just going to angle myself this way a little bit.
Wait, I think,
Chemicals are not dripping on you, are they?
I don't know what's dripping on me.
Because the chemical above us is a lab.
As
Like,
long
yeah.
it's chemical lab.
I don't know.
as long as you don't get
So something must have dripped, yeah.
24 hours, you're fine.
Best case scenario.
You start feeling
is water
burning.
that drips on your head.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario is a chemical that
You
fell
see
on
it
your
well.
head.
Just had this haircut too. Although we already had the sample photos, so I'd only embarrass myself in front of relatives, so. Anyway, so,
sir, if you die, we have it on video.
yeah, okay, good. In the event of my unfortunate demise, I leave everything to my wife. There you go. That's the Zoomer version of a will and last will and testament.
Actually, that can be over.
So, anyway, SpongeBob can currently delete Mr. Krabs' wisdom. Delete. And there you go, it's gone, right? In theory, you should have to be the user who owns the request, owns the post in order to be able to delete it. So, let's implement that, shall we? So, in our delete, it used to be very simple, right? We just perform our delete, no questions asked. But now, we have to verify that the received user parameter is equal to the user parameter for this piece of wisdom that we are trying to delete. So we have to fetch it first. So, query. Select star from wisdom where ID is equal to, there we go. Now, oh, I'm not gonna, that's not gonna be, Get rid of those. Now, we prepare a statement. Database handle, prepare the query. And basically we want to execute this with the same parameters. On success, we then check to see that the tweet, basically we're checking to see if author matches the user in our session database, in our session superglobal, right? So, sorry, what? Okay. Oh, and we also need to establish that the session even exists. So, server, what is it, session at user is set, right? Else HTTP response code 404 or 403, there we go. App, there we go. So if success, statement, the data is statement fetch all, or I guess fetch one will be sufficient. Fetch EDO : fetch associative. There we go. There we go. Now our row that has been fetched from the database will be right here. At the moment, I'm not validating that exactly one row was sent, but you know, we can't do everything, you know. So if data at author does not equal session at user, then someone is trying to delete a tweet they don't have permission to delete. We send a 403 back and exit. Probably a 0 is fine, because this is intended to happen. So if we hit the condition where the author of the tweet of the wisdom is not the user that's currently logged in, it exits before we reach the delete statement, which means that the delete is not performed. Right? So let's take a look. And while we're at it, I think I'm going to put in a thing where it tells us which user we're logged in as. There we go. Logged in as user 3 at wisdom. So now, if we try deleting, money is my only friend. Notice we get a 403 response on our delete. Notice if we reload the wisdom, it has not been deleted from the from the database. Now, what you would do if you were very clever is you would not put the delete button on other people's posts, right? But this is these are client-side concerns. I am right now just interested in server-side concerns, primarily anyway.
We should also have like, just in case anything goes wrong, like stopping block on the side of the server, just in case.
Well, precisely so. Like, in some sense, designing your server, you should write your server code in such a way that it can run both like this buggy initial version of the project and the final version of the project, where you wouldn't even be able to send a delete request of this nature, because remember that the API is an exposed web interface. It is not just going to be accessed through this web page you're designing, right? It could be accessed through other people's web pages. It could be accessed through, random Python scripts, that kind of thing, right? So, yes. This web page is not necessarily the only entry point into your server. And that's always a very, very important consideration that people often forget. People think about the client and the server as being the same thing in some sense, but you have to draw a line between them and understand that the client you've written might not be the client who's trying to access your website, because it's the internet, and your server will be servicing packets from whoever decides to send a packet. Does that make sense? Good. So, so far so good. So I'd like to do an example where we differentiate different types of GET requests based on a sent parameter. So one thing that's reasonably common in these sorts of social media situations is to be able to view a single user's posts, right? Now that we have identified user numbers, we should be able to reasonably easily hack together something where you only view one person's posts, right? Seems reasonable? Again, we're going to do a very hacky, prototypey way of doing this. We don't have anything here that resembles show me all users, right? Although we could write something like that. Basically, just to get it working in principle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a text box that will take a number and then get this user number's posts. I realize this is terrible design. Even if you were typing out someone's username, that's still terrible design. But, again, this is a server-side consideration, not a client-side consideration. You got a question?
Yeah, it is just a thought, but if you had to post this Twitter example on internet and you had to try to get the access of database from the client side, is that possible?
Try to get what sort of access from the client side?
To the database.
Well, this is the point of a REST API, is that you are providing a controlled access to the database, right? You're providing an access to the database that is not vulnerable to SQL injection attack. That is, controlled in some way so that, you must be validated to be able to put information into the database or delete information from the database, that type of thing, right? So, in some sense, that's the entire purpose of what we're doing here, is giving randos on the internet access to a database. That is all that Twitter is, right? So, yeah, but do we put a text box in here that says, write your own SQL, chumps? No, we don't do that. Because that is how one gets the SQL injection attack. That's so bad, people would probably send you attacks just as jokes. It's wow, your security is so bad that this is possible.
But they won't open the door to the classroom because you're passing.
I mean, neither here nor there. So let's take a look. So this is an example of, so we have to dive into Client a little bit. This is intended to be an example of this bit here. Basically, I'm going to use the same style here to be able to get posts from a particular user, right? I'm adding a second type of GET request. So, in our index page, we should have a box for that. Perhaps get user wisdom. And then we also have a input type equals text. ID is equal to sure, why not? We can be friends. Jumping into the JavaScript. The get from a particular person is of course very similar to get from all people, but the URL will change, right? So in this case, I'm going to change posts to user because that's more descriptive. And then I'm going to append to this the value in that text box. Document dot query selector. What do we call it? Friend dot value. There we go. Bing bang boom. Now,
Colons.
which colons?
Well, because like in the example you gave, it was the slash colon. and then,
Oh! This gets replaced with the parameter value before you send it. Yeah.
Bless you.
I know it's a little bit like strange, but this, like anything with the so that starts with a colon, is not intended to ever be actually sent to this as a string to the server. This parameter should be swapped out for what course ID you want to send. Right? Does that make sense? Cool. Any questions? Okay. So there we go. Save. Now on our dispatch side, we are no longer simply content with checking to see if we're doing get anyways. We're no longer simply content to see that the message type is get. We now have two different types of get parameters, or two different types of get packets that can be sent. They are distinguished by the contents of their URLs. So, in order to distinguish them by the contents of their URLs, you must have some way of getting that information. So we have our explode line, right? So switch within a switch. Oh. Switch args at 0. Case. In one case, we were sending posts. I think it was posts. Case user. posts and user, yes. So, the way that I'm using this here, the first string after API specifies which operation I'd like to perform. That's why I'm switching on it, right? That's why I'm switching on it. But, it doesn't necessarily, that's not the only way to do it. There are lots of other ways to do it. Okay? So basically, I'm executing one query in the case where I'm just doing it the old way, get me all of the posts, select star, right? If a particular user has been specified, then I'm saying where author is equal to some past parameter, right? In the case where I am switching over this particular author, I am providing as a parameter to this query the user ID number which has been passed from the client in the URI. Note, this is different from the user validation, like the validated user number that exists in your session, right? That would be view all my posts. This is just view all of that person's posts. So, we throw in args at 1. Other than that, everything goes the same way as usual. Make sense? So far so good? Save. Well, let's test her out, see if she's fit for purpose. Oh, wow, okay. I've got a spare thingy. There it is. How embarrassing. So, if I want to get user 1's wisdom, I get an error. Let's see here. Oh, perhaps I didn't set the on-click correctly. Let me take a look. Get user wisdom. Always something like this. Get user wisdom. I forgot to rename the function. Okay. So it goes. Notice. Oh yeah, okay, I did get an error. Alright. User 1. What do we get? Console. It totally is though. Refresh.
You might have to clear the cache. Because it would have saved the JavaScript, or you clear the storage.
Okay. It doesn't say it has session. Local storage. No, it doesn't look like it has anything saved. Let me just double check that I didn't misspell something. Yes, it was different.
Sir, a question.
Yeah?
It's gonna sound dumb, but you have to press save on the JavaScript, right?
I believe I did. Save.
Kinda dumb.
Yeah.
It's not defined, like,
Did you get any rejections?
It's probably something stupid.
sorry,
Well, I wasn't sure.
But did the other people see?
This one works. It's literally the same code. Come on. Oh yeah? You don't think it's defined, do you? Well, then let's define it. Oh,
Can you inspect the script element?
that's a good idea. They don't just let you copy paste in JavaScript functions, they. Elements? Where is it? Inspector. It's not there.
You could technically, you could base the console, it just says, like, if you type in allow page or something.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
How do you do the JavaScript then? No, that doesn't look like it at all. I'm closing it down. Restart.
That's my problem because I wasn't I'm getting error.
Well, that's interesting.
You gotta go to the, index.
I gotta go to what?
You have to, like, type it in for index.
Oh, yeah, that's true. This is a local host, it shouldn't be so slow. Right. Let's try her again. Ha! That's a different error. Malformed query, eh? Alright, well that's definitely a different error. That would seem to indicate I made a mistake in my and maybe you have to put where first. I didn't think it would matter. Why am I on set?
This is the error in my
Where are my packets? No throttling my ass. Oh, yeah, there are. Ah! Ah! It works! There you go. So, I enter user 1, I get user 1's wisdom. I enter user 3, I get user 3's wisdom. If you remember, Squidward is user 2, but his login is cursed, so I can't log into it. So he didn't get to post anything, which is probably the most Squidward thing I've ever heard of. So there you go. One request type, multiple different functions, depending on the form of the URL which is sent.
I
Yeah?
got distracted. What did the malform query was?
Oh, I had order by and where swapped.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Order
it was
by
like-
and then
It was like select from blah, order by descending where,
yeah,
yeah,
instead of where.
instead of where and then order by. Yeah. So that was why my query was malformed. So my error message was correct. I did have a malformed query. So
we still don't know what the other one was though, right?
I just restarted the server.
I swear it's probably a caching issue. I have it all the time with Firefox.
Yeah.
It's like I have to clear the entire, cache system
Yeah.
before I can reload and test a change on like my JavaScript.
So
It works great on Chrome. Firefox is very strict.
Can I just say that I'm not, I used to like Firefox, but now I'm not so much a fan. I don't think they've kept pace, you know? Yeah, so any questions about any of that? Anything that people, oh, yes, question?
Are you gonna post this on the canvas?
Without question, yes. I'll post it to the announcements feed.
Can you export the database?
I will do that, yeah, I'll export the database. So, does anybody have any questions about like this or the course contents? Anything? We got like 20 minutes left. Last chance to ask me anything before the exam.
For the database security slides,
Yes? The poorly formatted ones? Yes.
yeah, I was just gonna say, it's so poorly formatted, it's so fun.
What would be the final exam?
I was just gonna ask if you can talk like I know that's long.
I think having an exam is going to be his main concern. I don't think any course materials are going to get fixed before. And frankly, I kind of just posted it. Like, I didn't ask his permission first, I kind of just did it. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, you had, I think on the login screen, you had a colon and then the user, when you're passing it into the database.
Yeah.
Is that what you're passing, like, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I can go over that quickly. So, goodbye. Good luck. So, basically, there are two styles for forming the SQL query using TDO. There's the version where your argument position matters, and the version where your argument position doesn't matter. So, if the query type you're using has question marks, then when you execute,
Oh, that's an associative array versus a non-associative, okay. All right.
Precisely.
Makes more sense.
yeah, it's associative versus non-associative, absolutely. These values are positioned in the order that they appear in the array, right? Now, if you have one of the form x, y, z, X, Y, right? Instead of relying on position within the array to slot in the question marks, it says, okay, X goes here, Y goes there, Z goes there, regardless of their position in the associative array. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for the, so the colon context, does it only work on PHP, or is that a, like, I'm assuming PHP is the thing that's breaking it down into a string using that context? It's not, what's it called, SQL that's doing that?
No. You don't hit SQL until you actually send the thing to execute. Yeah. This string processing occurs in PHP. Yeah. Yes. Also, this syntax is shared in your REST API specifications. That's the same way they designate where the parameters are in a URI. Make sense?
So in that case, instead of exploding something, would you pull variables from the URI?
No, it's still it's
Because it still passes a string, I guess there's no variable there.
precisely. In theory, what you can do, like if you want to, you can set up your URI so that these are kind of like key value pairs, which is a construct that you see quite frequently. But I don't know about you, but I've been seeing quite a few websites lately that's like long series of digits, long series of digits, long series of digits, right? And that, in that case, they're not doing key value pairs, they're just going positionally. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Of any kind? Whatsoever? Any features you want to see if I can hack into this thing quickly before class is ended? No? Are we resolved that that is a complete example? All right.
Anything else you think we should know?
The test, the exam is going to be much like the test. There has been some talk. There has been some talk on the sort of private professor email chains for this course, that it has finally come to the awareness, everyone's awareness, that the 2040 weighting, which was, which Steve believed was the correct weighting for the midterm and the exam, is not what is given in the course outline. The course outline is given 30-30. The proposed resolution to this is to enact both and take the higher. So if this gets made into official policy, the course will have 2 official grading schemes, and you will automatically be selected for the grading scheme under which you will score higher. One of these places higher weighting on the midterm, splits the difference evenly between the midterm and the exam. The other one makes the exam a bit heavier. So that
Java.
seems,
It's like Java.
yes, similarly to how things were done in Java, yeah. Or was it Java or JavaScript? I forget.
Java.
But yeah, Java is the one that has like the 70% exam
So
possibility.
basically, if someone blows the midterms in this course, the final exam will be weighted a little bit heavier, but they can still, pass the course.
Well, if you flubbed the midterm, right? If you do well on the exam will be 40% instead of 30%, which sounds like more, but it's not that much more really. Like as such things go, this is like a relatively minor alteration in the grade scheme, so, you know, with respect to that, I'm not, like, let me put it to you this way. Even when it's like your midterms don't count at all and entire midterm weight goes on to the final, which was the case in Java, if my memory is serving me correctly, normally only a handful of the students actually benefit from that if you go through their grades and like, you know, because I keep statistics on these sorts of things. When I was teaching 2 sections of Java, I had under 10 people who benefited from that dual grade scheme, and of the people who benefited from it, I don't think anyone benefited by more than 4% on their final grade from the grade scheme. So basically, unless you had some kind of like specific reason you didn't do well on the midterm, like you really had a strong cold that day but decided to write the thing anyways, or you know, you broke up with your significant other the day before or something, but you're totally over it now. If there's something like that that prevented you from doing well on the midterm, you will probably benefit from having a more heavily weighted exam. But in general, midterm grades are they're quite good at predicting exam grades. Like if you look at it from a statistics point of view. Now, you have to be careful when you're doing statistical analysis, because like on average, something can be true, but that does not mean it's true for any particular person, right? Because that's how statistics work. It's like, you know, on average, smoking kills people, but that doesn't prevent, you know, your grandmother from being 95 and smoking like a chimney, right? So on average, people who don't do well on the midterm won't do well on the exam, but that doesn't mean that there's no hope if you didn't do well on the midterm, right? You can pull up your socks, you can study, and improve your grade, and you're being offered perhaps, you know, a slightly improved chance to improve your grade depending on how well you do on the exam. Does that make sense? But yeah, so that's about where I see the course shaping up. Oh, just one thing I should address in class this business about when the bloody hell assignment 4 is due. Perhaps you saw my announcement, and then my clarification of my announcement. So this is how it's working. The assignment 4 deadline is not moving. It is still this Friday, but the number of late days which may be used against this assignment has been relaxed from a maximum of 3 to a maximum of 7. So if you were a good little student and never used your late days, even though it was completely reasonable for you to use your late days this semester because of the way the bloody assignments were structured, I'm not, you know,
So we can use
I
all
have
10
some-
of those.
If you didn't use any of them.
yeah, if you have any remaining late days, you may use them on assignment 4 up to a maximum of 7 instead of 3, and 3 instead of 0, which was what I was thinking that it was, because I really don't like assignments being due after the exam. You know, to me, that's a failure condition, you know? Like, the course was not well structured if anything is due after the exam, you know? But unfortunately, this is just the way that the semester has gone. It's, you know, if I contributed to this problem in any way, I'm not aware of it, and I apologize. So yeah, so that's the deal with assignment 4. The deadline is not the 16th. The deadline is this Friday, same as it has always been. It's how many late days you're allowed to use that has been relaxed. leaving your poor professor precious little time to actually grade with late things.
And we can use up to 7.
Yes,
If we have.
basically, you can use late days to get yourself up to a full week's extension. But that is the absolute last day on which I will be accepting any submissions whatsoever, because I have to have my grades in by the following Wednesday. So there is no, actually no, I'm sorry. I believe I have to have my grades in by Monday afternoon. So it's gonna be a fun weekend for me that weekend. But you know, I know that kind of rings a little bit hollow when you guys have been working through weekends all semester because you're students. But you know,
They don't answer this.
I'm supposed to have like a union, you know? You guys have a student union, I guess, but it's not that kind of union, you know? Ugh. Yeah, you guys get to do this while you're young. I have to do this until I'm like 70, you know? So, yeah.
You can get a good job.
I could get a good job, that's true, but I don't know, I kind of like this one. For a person who's like, you know, just an incurable know-it-all, standing on a stage and telling people things is not a bad gig, actually. It has its perks, you know, good dental. Yeah. I do agree, though, that I would make more money if I were in industry, but, you know. This is what I'm doing. I'm sacrificing the money I would be making in industry to, like,
For more power.
for more power. I was going to say to encourage and strive for excellence in the young people of society. You know, all of you are the bright, shining examples of what the future could be if only you apply yourself and come to class. So, yeah, general life advice. Don't take any wooden nickels. Speak the truth. And yeah, take time every once in a while to not do work.
Play Factorio.
Play Factorio, yes. All work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. You had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, are you gonna post like, just like the midterm, are you gonna post any like sample questions that could be on the exam or?
Thank you very much.
Just, I guess for the, like, you know how like the last question it dealt with, like it was related to the slots question that you did, like the problem, like question 9. I don't know, can you do something like that if it's like database?
I don't know how much material is going to get published before the 18th.
Okay, but if you're able to, I mean.
I mean,